I'll text you. I call the Muhlenberg Township meeting for Wednesday, May 18, 2022, to order all please rise for the pledge of flag. I believe
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, members of our Muhlenberg Township for a joint meeting tonight. Discuss two things. First, our digital sign we'll go through first, because I think that one's pretty easy. The future of water and the water well discussion at Jim Dietrich Park. So I think, Jim, I think all the board members saw the proposal we received for the sign, the Welcome to Muhlenberg Township sign. So that landed and it was vetted by a vendor who came and approached us about putting a sign there, and you see it in read, so I don't want to reiterate it. The best way to put that sign was at that location, and going through the process, we learned that the Muhlenberg Township Authority plan. So obviously we want to discuss it with the authority. The sign, without going through the whole presentation, we could answer questions for it, but you see about 25,000 cars, I think, a day, and they take care of building this sign, and they add space on it, they push local businesses, there can't be any campaign material on it, and it generates some revenue. So it is no cost to us. However, the way they do their agreement, they have to do with the township. So what we were going to do and ask the authority to do is release us that parcel and have Mr. Ralph Giuseppe draft an agreement for hopefully $1. Let's say that was our request. What we would do with the revenue, what we're recommending is possibly putting it into a special fund that we could just keep as a reserve fund that we could both share in projects. A sinkhole pops up or something happens with both boards with both on it. It doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but you know, it's enough that over the course of time, I think the lease is 25 years, Jim, if I remember. You know, could create something that will pop up that we lose. We think it's, if you look through the packet, it's pretty impressive sign that they give, and they take care of all the work. Joey and Joel from our team have the veto ability. If there's something on there we deem would be inappropriate, they give us a piece of mind that one, but we would like to ask that the MTA consider that. Then, you know, like I said, it's not like it's a big revenue generator, it will cost us nothing. And I think Commissioner Imhoff brought up before about a billboard going across, is right across the highway. However, this, I guess they do not classify as a billboard, it's more of a welcoming sign. So it does not have the hindrance or the prohibition that a full-scale billboard would have. So I don't know if any of my other board members have any comments, and then I'll be happy to take any questions from Muhlenberg authority members, but that was our recommendation to the board, that we would be able to lease that parcel of land. Quite frankly, I mean, if we wanted to, we could take it, but I don't think that's the appropriate way we want to do a partnership. So that would be the request we would have from MTA. So does anyone have any questions regarding anything? Comments about it? Jim, do you have anything else to add?
No, Joe's got a couple of samples up there. There's a couple different design examples that we could go with, but no, you pretty well covered it.
You can see it ends right at that sidewalk that's in front of the liquor store and the Five Below right now. You're right at the end of that. This is something like we would have, probably a two-tiered effect like that with the stone, ground effects lighting. They take care of the landscaping, maintenance, everything. And it generates about $18,000 a year. We also would have the opportunity to put slides for the authority and ourselves up there, announcements, bills due, anything, Riverfest. So.
Mr. President, the board and our board, I think it's great. And as you proposed it, when it looks great for the community, all of Muhlenberg Township, and that's what we're all here for. And the revenue sharing between us, come up with something that was a great idea, and I hope our board can see fit to approve that as you presented it. So well done.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Okay. Would the MTA board be in agreement with what was proposed?
It'd probably be something we ought to talk about it in the meeting. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak for the board, but I believe just when we talked about it individually, there's general agreement. See the agreement, there's one item of tax implications, I believe that we're now making revenue in the land, so that has to be worked out, and so as long as we see the agreement, I think it's no problem.
Thanks. Then I guess, but Mr. Setley and Mr. Ralph can work up, regular standard lease agreement, Michael.
Yeah, I think that'd be, probably, I don't know if the billboard company would do this or what. But I have to probably get a surveyor out there to define what it is.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Timing wise, could we have the lease by our next meeting? Is that possible?
Tomorrow, yeah.
Tomorrow?
Great.
When's your
Next meeting. First full week, Monday, the first full week of the month, so it's the 5th or something
I
like
don't
that.
see any reason.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. We do think it will look, to Mr. Wood's comments, there'll be a definite unification of that corridor, so we're excited to have it, plus it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything extra special. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, the water discussion at Jim Dietrich Park. So I guess at this time, the board, I'll turn it over to, well, Commissioner Imhoff as a liaison. So to start the process or present, the board members like to present.
Well, the commissioners had some questions. So we had asked the professionals to stop by this evening. And they can answer the questions better than we can. Mr. Mundell is there.
Yes.
And also Bill Velasco,
Right.
right alongside from SSN. Both of you spots to, correct?
No, I'm retired.
Are you?
Yes.
What did you do something like that for?
It's
It's
fine,
good seeing you
yeah.
again anyway.
Retired a little over a year, but I came in here to, so I worked on your welfare.
So I'll tell you what, the board members had the questions. One of the questions I see first was, do we really need water? Mr. Weinfelder.
I think that's probably a question for Jeff or Scott.
Okay.
Well, currently we have 9 wells in the township, capable of producing 5.2 million gallons a day. Our total sales are somewhere around 3.4 million gallons a day. Out of the total that we produce, there's a category that everybody calls non-revenue flushing or non-revenue water, which is street sweeping, fires, flushing of hydrants, and so forth. That's a number that we've used as long as I've been with the authority, 15% of your total production. So out of that, when you take your total production minus total sales, minus your 15% for non-revenue, your total pumping then for the day, whatever the difference is what your reserve is. Currently, our reserve is 405,000 gallons a day. And that's the extent of it. One of the things that we look at is, and we use as a guideline is, if you were to lose your largest well in your system, would you have enough water to continue operation? Our largest well pumps 1.2 million gallons a day, and we have 405,000 in reserve. So the answer to that question would no. If it was an extended period of time, we would have to make some adjustments to be able to serve the township.
Our capacity, 5.2 million per day,
Yes.
but that comes down to 45,000 per day.
Yeah, well, when you take out your sales from that, okay, that's what we could produce total. So
Yeah.
just have it here. Yeah, I don't know what to do.
Just where you look here.
So you take
What
what
are
you,
the sales per day?
about 3.4 million. And then the last category in that is unaccounted for water. That would be any underground leaks that we have, meter error, or whatever that you can't account for that water. For our system right now, it's at 12%. DEP standard, I believe, is 20% or below for a system as large as ours.
So Jeff, we cycle through all of our water days, we're under 48 hours, right?
Yeah, you would. But you have about 4.5 million in storage if the tanks are all full.
All right, one of the other questions was, would another holding tank take away the need for a new well?
Bill, you want to do that or?
Well, the holding tank is gonna need to be replenished as the water is consumed. So it all depends how quickly that water gets consumed. If there's an event that requires more water than usual, then there's gonna need to be time for that to be refilled. That's kind of a tough question to answer.
It might extend the amount of time that you have water in reserve because you have the additional water in the tanks. But with the same amount of production going into those tanks to replenish it will also take longer.
Right, and to follow up what he was saying earlier, if there's an event where your largest well is out of service, it's gonna take some time to fill up that tank. So, yes, that will provide you with capacity for a future event, but once that tank is empty, it's a short-term fix because you're not adding new water. You're just storing from your existing wells.
To add to that, wouldn't an extended event be a large frac farm?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, for example, that place that makes meat trays over and Tucker, that place lights up.
Yeah, we did a little research on that. If they have one of their deluge guns out in the yard go off, it's 300 gallons a minute. That's one gun. They've got 40 some in that yard.
So that would drain that out pretty quick, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right, one of the questions was, what are the risks for any new sinkhole developing? And would MTA sign an agreement to correct any new sinkholes? That's two questions. Let's take the first one first. What are the risks for any new sinkholes?
Well, the well's gonna have, I guess I'll take this.
You're the geologist.
Yeah. So, we construct a well, the top hole properly, all right? The test hole that was drilled out there was just a test hole. It wasn't, the casing was not sealed on the outside. And a lot of people saw those sinkholes happen next to that test hole when we were out there twice repairing it. And that is right next to the well. And we sat there for a month and we drilled that well and blew that well. It was a difficult well to drill because it was we're on a very good fracture zone with a high permeability, high yield potential. Okay, so we blew that for about a month and blew a lot of material out of that location. So, and then the well was never finished. It was never reamed and grouted on the outside. So we had a kind of an open conduit there, and that's what caused those sinkholes right next to that well. All right. So that casing would be removed, that well will be reamed, And then that outer casing would be sealed, and you can properly would construct your top hole. And that well would be cased at least 200 feet deep, okay? So now that all the water you're gonna be pulling from that well is gonna be pulled from an elevation that's 200 feet or level, it's 200 feet below ground level. Then again, you're in a nice large fracture zone, you have nice laminar flow conditions, and you're pulling at a deep zone, you're not pulling right up top next to the zone. Okay, so the risk of sinkhole is minimized. Now, you can get sinkholes if you mine groundwater. All right, so if you have a water table that's up here and then you pump it down and down here, that dewatering can cause a sinkhole condition. And you're gonna have some dewatering right next to your well, probably, you know, in that wellhead protection area. One thing with carbonate geologies, high yielding geologies, is they have a strong ability to capture water. So it's pulling from a far area. And with what we call high permeability, high transmissivity aquifers, like the carbonate that's out of Dietrich Park, you're going to have a depression that's closer to the well, and then it's going to be just gradual. I could draw you a picture better, but it's going to be a drawdown that goes gradual and then kind of close to the well, versus a well that has a lower permeability, it's going to start deeper and kind of go bigger like that. So you're not dewatering a lot of area. So all this, if you case that well properly, build that top hole properly, have 200 feet of casing in there, that risk of sinkhole development right next to that well, or even further out from the well, is going to be minimal, I think, and it's well worth the risk for the amount of water you could get.
The casing itself, you put a perimeter around as far as grout, concrete, what do you do there?
Yeah, that to build that well, you're going to telescope casing down. It's probably going to 2 or 3 casing. So you're going to have the first casing go down maybe 70 feet to rock. Or I forget, I don't have the well logs. It's been a year since I was at that spot, so I did not see that, but I can refresh myself on that. But you might have 20 foot of casing and then maybe a 70 foot casing and then your 200 foot casing. And each one of those casings is going to get grouted in. So you're going to have a minimum of 1.5 inches of grout seal on the outside of it.
It just kind of look like a telescope?
Yep, exactly. And like an old telescope.
Okay, and at the top, what would the largest diameter of the casing?
Well, it depends on what, we probably, I think you probably want a 12-inch finish. We didn't talk about this. We probably have a 12-inch finish hole, and you have to have 3 inches each, so you'd be 15 would be your next, or maybe 16-inch, and then like 20, so it'd be 20, 16. And the well has to stick up, the casing has to stick up 18 inches. So the inner casing only, the other casings could be flush to the ground, the inner casing would stick up 18 inches.
Got a question here, with a full court press, would DEP give us a waiver of the 400 foot well protection zone?
You're not going to get 400 feet there because you don't own it. That picture is actually incorrect. That red, you should only have one circle, and that circle should go to the tree line on the southern boundary of the park. Right now, unless you could get an easement to control the guy's backyard, that you show that circle on it right now.
Is that the property that's for sale, Jeff?
No,
Do we know whose property that is?
So
no.
you have about 270 feet in zone 1 area. So the well site, you're gonna come, here's the property of the park, and this would be the diameter of your circle. So it's a lot smaller than what you're showing here.
Okay.
So, and again,
Where'd that show
it's
come from?
270, 278 feet around there is your zone 1. Because that's the available area you have to control, that's park area, unless you could get an easement from this homeowner here, which would go in his backyard, I wouldn't give you that. I mean, you know, so you're limited on what you can do.
Now I'm confused.
Me too.
That circle, where'd that show?
That was created in 2017 when this discussion began. I don't know if, I think actually we created that in-house, and all that represents is a 400-foot, what we understood to be the Zone 1 wellhead protection zone of a 400-foot radius around the wellhead.
So are we looking at soccer fields there to the left of that picture?
You're looking at
The
corner soybean fields to the right and the Spring Fiesta lot to the left.
could we get a marker? Could you take a rough guess of what the actual area would be?
I think it's about 278 foot diameter, or radius, I mean, around the well.
Would you be able to draw a circle up there
Well,
to
he's
give us a
suggesting,
better idea?
he's suggesting that it's only going to run to the property line of the park, correct? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that property line is about,
If that's the case, is that the property line?
about
Okay. But in order to pull this off, we have to have an easement from the neighbor.
No,
you're not gonna go on the neighbor's property, you're not gonna get.
You're not.
I wouldn't recommend it. You do that.
Okay.
So
And I don't understand, how are you complying with 400 feet?
the Zone 1 it's a DP regulation, it's either 100 or 400 foot radius. And the bigger you can, the higher, the more water you can pump.
And is that how they rate their zones?
Yeah, how much
By
water you
how much
pump.
water is pumped
Yeah,
out?
by reducing that zone, it limits, this well could do 2 million gallons, but we may only be able to do 1.5 because of the zone.
Okay. So then what is the DEP regulation for zone 1? How many feet?
It's 100 to 400 foot,
100 and 400.
100 to 400.
100 to 400.
Right.
Between 100 and 400, depending on
But-
how much
we would
water is
only
drawn
get-
from the well.
We would only get what we could easily by getting an easement from the park, which would be about 278 foot radius from the well, or distance from the well.
I'm sorry, can someone just clarify what the two colors are? What is the red versus the orange?
The orange, again, we created this back in 2017, and I don't recall why we created two different colors. The red is a 300-foot radius, the orange is a 400-foot radius.
It's smaller than the red. What you're gonna lock up in a protected area can be smaller than that red circle.
Let's see. How much water would we draw daily? I think that's the answer.
All right,
No,
no,
no.
no, so when we started this conversation a couple of years ago, if I remember right, the targeted amount was 2 million gallons. That's 2 million per day? Okay, so just to clarify that, that was the original requested amount, that was the target amount. And I don't recall at that time that we had a discussion that we might draw less than that. I don't remember a discussion tied into the radius around the wellhead.
When we started the well site study, we were looking for 1 million gallon a day source. All right, and just put this, that's 700 gallons a minute. It's a lot of work, okay? Roughly 700 gallons a minute. To try to find a source like that's a big well source. And they don't come along every day. I've been doing this almost 40 years and I have 5 in my career. And I cited hundreds of wells.
So at 1 million gallons per day.
Right, well, that's what when we originally started the siting study and looking at sites, that's kind of was the goal. Now, when we found this site, let me backtrack a little bit. You get water from fracture zones. You don't just get water from the rock. You have to find a good fracture zone. And these fractures, you have to look at the earth, it's pliable like a basketball, okay? So as the earth rotates, it needs to be pliable when it kind of moves. Well, the theory is that these fracture zones allow these little micro movements in the earth to kind of keep it pliable. So you have very vertical steep fracture zones where you have movement as the earth kind of lets it be pliable like a basketball. When you're siting a well, if you can hit an intersection of those fracture zones, they're very vertical zones. And if you can get an intersection, and which gives you an opportunity to stay in that while you're drilling, you have a high potential for a high yielding well. Now, those zones don't occur just everywhere. They're difficult to find. When we hit this site, we are definitely in a fracture intersection, a fracture zone, and at 200 feet, it was still very broken up. It was broken up the whole way down, and at 200 feet, I mean, it was a very, very broken zone. I forget the total depth we took the well. We had to stop because there was so much water. We couldn't advance the drill bit for the size. There was too much water fighting us. So we started with 1 million, but we think this site has actually more potential than that.
But you just said we can't do more because we're not over the wellhead.
Well, that links into how you construct your well too. If you have at least 200-foot open borehole, we could probably get, and I don't know exactly what that zone 1 area is anymore, I never saw an actual survey, but you're probably getting close to maybe 1,400 gallons a minute would be the peak. That so you are maybe at your 200, maybe, but that would be a max.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, the well could possibly produce 2 million gallons of water a day.
Possible.
The target is at least 1 million gallons a day, that's what you'd like to draw.
Right.
But the EP has a regulation that says, depending on how much water you're drawing, so I understand this. The radius around this well gets larger depending on how much water you want to pump. Am I understanding right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if we would say the well will give us 5 million, but we can't get the zone, that would require a 400-foot radius. You're not going to get 5 million because you need 400.
Okay, so knowing that if we want to go to the upper end of this spectrum, we're already encroaching onto private property. So that's going to limit the amount that you can right there if we do not wish to go get easements, and we don't want to get into that tangle.
Right.
So right now, at 1 million gallons, what kind of, are we back to 100 foot, 200 foot, 300 foot? What kind of radius are we looking at?
It's 270, 278, somewhere there, I think it is.
Okay.
What you have that.
Approximately 278.
Yeah.
That keeps us, I'm sorry, one last question then. So that radius, that keeps us totally within the boundaries of the park.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's right up to the park property.
Now, I'm sorry. So then one other follow-up question. Then, just to the, I guess, Jeff, at 1 million gallons, does that meet the need? If you were originally looking at 1 million, you could hit 2 million, but you're just saying 1 million gallons meets your needs.
That would be enough that if our largest well went down, we'd still be able to operate at full capacity, yes.
I'm done.
Can you ask the next question with that though? That given the 278-foot radius, what is the maximum amount that we can produce from that wellhead?
It all depends on your well construction. We haven't finished it yet. But yet, to get that amount of water, you need at least 200 feet of open borehole. So the well would have to be 400 feet deep if I cased it. If I put the casing at 200, I'd have another 200 feet open borehole. So the well would be total 400. Yeah.
So, understand that, and I'll take your, at 278 feet wellhead protection, given some sort of design of the well, what's the maximum that DEP would allow us to pump, given that 278-foot radius?
I think it's about, it's a log graph. It's about 1,400 gallons. About
Which
that.
is about 2 million a year.
2 million.
2 million a day.
2 million a day. And that's operating 24/7. Or I mean, yeah.
So I guess the question is, because we all know, we can talk about the well all we want. The question is, does the board want to put a well in what I believe is a restricted covenant legal agreement that we have with the Beecher family? And that's the question. I mean, and I guess my question on top of that is, so you're saying there's nowhere else in our community, say Jim Dietrich didn't exist and she was still farming it, there's nowhere else we can draw 1 million gallons a day of water?
You might get lucky. Remember about fracture zones and fracture intersections? Okay, so, we drilled three or four other wells at the Dietrich Park site. Down, I guess, closer to the Schuylkill River, east, to the west.
Down there, and then 2 more up.
We did 4.
I'm taking, again, let's forget about Jim Dietrich.
I'm
for a
just,
second.
but we
Where
couldn't
else-
find the intersection. Okay, so
where else
then
would we go
so
if
then,
we couldn't drill there? And
we
it's-
went to the silt basin site.
So we went to the silt base, so
Right.
we can't get water anywhere else, so what?
We tried the site on fracture zones there. We did a couple of studies to try to find those zones. And we drilled 4 test wells over there and like 35 gallons a minute. You have other sites maybe where we could site a well, just here's a maximum zone 1 area you can get. And this is the only place you could put a well. And maybe we can get in a decent carbonate geology and get lucky. You might get lucky. So far, we haven't been lucky. We drilled with 9 test holes and we have 1 that hit. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, but
No, I
but-
hear you.
but
You
less-
get my point is if we didn't own this lot, where would we go if we needed excess water capacity? We have the quarry, we can get all that, and it would cost us 20 million. I think this, I heard could be $5 to $10 million too, to do this appropriately. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I think maybe 5.
5 million, so I know the number 20 million was thrown out at the quarry, which we should make a decision as a community. If we're just gonna let it sit there, we should do something with it. If it's not gonna be a viable water source for us, we should have a conversation about that, about what we should do with it. But if we didn't own this because of the restricted covenant, big copies of it, if you haven't read it, we have to have it out, that we made a promise to the Dietrich family not to put public improvements on, and I appreciate that. But I think the question that we have to have answered before we would break our promise, and I believe our legal responsibility is, what will we do if we had nowhere else to get water from? What will we do? I mean, we go to Bravo, we go to Western Berks, will we force them to use the quarry? That's a question.
And, you know, there are all options. You can
guys
go
are
to
the
Wawa, you could go to Western Berks, you could, I mean, Muhlenberg's pretty built out, you know, and there's a lot of industry.
Sure.
You know, there's certain things that go into the siting study. First, you have to have area to look. And if you have enough area to look, then hopefully you can find a fracture trace zone, an intersection. If you're just going to every little parcel here and there and trying to plug a well down, it's a crapshoot. You might get 100, you might get lucky, maybe you'll get 100 gallon a minute, maybe you'll get 150. To get it, you're not gonna get a 6, 7, 1,400 gallon a minute well.
No, I completely understand that. I completely understand that. The point being is that I don't think that it's our decision to do that at that particular location.
Mhm.
Because I believe we signed a legal agreement and we signed it with the family not to do that.
I-
And I hear what you're saying, and I part produces much water, but if she knew that we were gonna drill a well there, she probably would charge, how much money does that bring in 1 year in revenue? She would have sold the park property for a lot greater value than she gave it to us specifically for park and rec purposes. I guess my concern that the seat I'm sitting at is if we can't build a well there, like we couldn't just go on Commissioner Wolfenberg's property and say, hey, we're putting a well here. What else would we do?
So I think you, excuse me, I think you referenced all the options and there's a whole bunch more. There's plan Bs out there.
Okay.
The question is, are the plan Bs the viable plan or the most cost effective, the most suiting to give up? So I think we're here today with the most beneficial, understanding the contract and the obligation. This is the best option that exists for us today. If this board votes no today, our job is to go back and basically get plan B.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess that's my for what would be only 1 million gallons a day, which is a short-term fix if one well goes down, and it's costing us $5 million to do that. Why wouldn't we invest in the long-term solution? If it is the part, I don't know your business. Why wouldn't we invest in a longer-term solution that's gonna actually fix the problem? So we do get businesses coming in, NGK develop the mold, develop more that will go pretty quickly. So why don't we look at doing something more long-term? And this sounds like a short fix, and also a short fix that I don't believe we have the legal right to do. I guess that would be my question, Scott, for the board, is this, sounds like this is kind of a short fix because of the restrictions.
Well, we had a conference call with Scott on Friday, and his passion about what he said about his 40 years kind of turned me on this a little bit. So I'm very much in favor. We voted as a board. We're not, unanimous, but the board here feels Dietrich is the #1 option for us as it exists today. So that being said, Scott impressed upon me how rare this situation is. This is a well that doesn't come along every day. We might only get 1 million out of it, might get 2 million out of it. We don't know. There's always concerns with these wells. One thing I didn't like in the conversation is the closeness to the river, and I have full transparency here, is if this is determined to be surface water influenced, then we don't drill a well there, because then we can't use it for other reasons. So there's no guarantees here, but again, in full disclosure, this is what we're giving as our best option. And we're coming to you with what some think is a resolved issue, some aren't. We're asking for a decision today. And we don't believe it's your responsibility. We believe it's our responsibility to supply water and come up with those alternatives to Plan B. And we're taking that very seriously. But until this is either yay or nay, that's where we need to move forward.
Well, it was November 17th.
I understand that.
Of 2017, so that's my frustration, is are we gonna be back here, not do anything? For that was how long ago? And be sitting here again and the board votes against it, that we're not looking at long-term solutions, we're looking at this quick fix, which at that point in time, and maybe, another board decides differently in the future. But to your point, Scott, I think to break a promise, the reason I won't vote for it, I understand we need water, I understand it's gonna cost money. I don't want to be the one sitting here, because my passion is economic development, as this board knows, to say, we can't bring you in because we don't have water. I completely understand all that, but it's more important to me that we as a community live up to our obligations and promises that we made to people. And we did this, or it wouldn't be in the agreement. That's what I believe. I don't believe she would have put it in there if she thought that, that's just my personal belief. I speak for myself, but I just want it on record that I just don't think this is a viable solution for us that has a long-term fix that I'd be comfortable with voting yes. So I appreciate all that. And I just want to be honest and open about it, as I have been.
So just so the commissioners understand our commitment, we have this responsibility.
Sure.
No matter how the vote goes today, we leave here with an understanding of Dietrich or Plan B. That's reality.
I appreciate that.
As far as the covenant, I actually went to school with Jim Dietrich. He was still 1 year after graduating. And I believe Faye Dietrich wanted to preserve that land and the memory of her son, perpetuity. And I believe, and I'm sure, if a well was placed on the property, it would be perpetuity, because no one could ever go on it. This would actually enhance the agreement and ensure the agreement that we made with the Dietrich.
Completely disagree, but go ahead.
Mike, I don't mean to be adversary here, but don't work for other water companies, large water companies in the area. And it's not unusual to see wells in parks.
I completely understand that, but she put in the agreement specific.
Yeah, I don't try to understand what her mind was, mindset. I'm just saying that it's common to see.
Sure. And look, I may be the only no vote here, so just to be honest about it, I'm just saying that, going through that process and that part, then where does it stop? That we put a well in, what do we do next? That we say it's not a public improvement.
Wait, you're going down the road there, you don't know anything about.
You're talking about this a legal agreement, John. You're saying you.
No, you're
think
talking
we-
about what comes next. There is no what comes next.
You don't know that.
I have just a general question. And, I'm not trying to play both sides here, but clearly see the fault line on this map here, and I know that's, looking at it as a layman, you know, that seems to be the only place where such a fault line is. You know, is there any sort of way to create a different type of well or access where we are not imposing upon the park, and perhaps build a building on that new land that we just acquired off-site and pump it and then go down?
Well, you could just develop a well and then pump it to any treatment location. You know, you could put your pump house facilities down along the river.
Still be stuck with that 278-foot radius, correct?
Excuse me?
We'd still be stuck with the radius.
Yeah, now, I mean, if you wanted to put a trail or something along the edge, maybe you shrink that to, you know, instead of 270, make it 260 or something, but you could limit it somehow, and maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there if you wanted to, you know.
The radius is coming off the access point, correct?
This is coming off the wellhead.
Yeah, the wellhead.
Right.
Can't we move the wellhead to somewhere else, such as that new land we just developed?
Not, I mean, you can shift it, you're on an intersection,
Right.
and you want to stay in that intersection, and additionally, the fault zone.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe you could shift it 20 feet or so, 25 feet, you know, I wouldn't recommend going much more than that, because you could get off that intersection. The idea is to get on that intersection of the fractures and stay on that, so you stay in that fracture zone at depth. You're not always drilling straight. These fracture zones sometimes have a little dip to them, and then you can get off. So if you get on that intersection, that increases your chances of staying in those breaks, because that's where the water comes from, the breaks.
So we couldn't have anything 90 degrees.
No.
It has to be curved. There's
Oh,
no-
like drill an angle hole or
Yeah.
something like that. And there's, no, I wouldn't recommend that.
Mr. Seppi,
Yes, sir.
legally, is this gonna create problems?
I don't know if they sound lawyer. The answer is who knows. I mean, the problem is, I think you have difficulty, I'm not the only lawyer, having anyone say, I guarantee you that this doesn't violate that covenant. This covenant's very strong. Does anybody challenge it? Yeah. It doesn't have to be a member of the Dietrich family. This covenant runs in favor of every resident of Muhlenberg Township. Does somebody challenge it really because it bothers them, or for any other reason, just to come and visit? It's possible. It's possible.
I have two questions. Excuse me, I have two questions. I'm a guy that always likes his cake. and eat it.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, there's nobody around here who loves Jim Dietrich more than Mike, and I respect what he's done to the township. We are in a little disagreement with the covenant issue. You know, and looking at it, I've read it, I don't have it time. And wanting to get my cake and eat it, I called up Judy Schwank and I said, I want to have a meeting with DEP. Because I can't believe that I was talking 400 feet, 11 acres. I can't believe that they would force us to have 800 feet circle of well protection in a farm area when there's nothing around it except dogs pooping on the ground. And I, you know, show me a scientist that's going to tell me that dog taking a crap in the ground is going to infect the well. You know, so we had a meeting.
Steve, I don't think those dogs are gonna impact that well if it's built properly.
I know.
Okay, but in the regulatory environment we live in right now, DEP won't allow it.
Well, look.
I'd sign up on it
looking at
tomorrow.
the Agreement, we're not supposed to do anything to hinder Jim Dietrich for recreational area. 11 acres I did it down here, 270 some feet is 7.56 acres. Where you're taking 7.56 acres from from the farm, which she said she wanted for recreation area. And my original thoughts have always been, you're gonna put up a nice farm-looking house, you're not gonna have, maybe we can, keep the two of the sections of the park there, cut it down to 100 feet, 200 feet. And DEP they didn't do anything with it. They said, no, that's, I said, well, the central region that wouldn't affect if we were there. And they said, that's a lie. This is the way it is through the whole Commonwealth. If you want to pump 2 million gallons, you're talking 800 feet, 11 acres, that's missing from Jim Dietrich Park, which I can see going against the code. Okay, if we get that down to 2 acres, I could go along with this thing.
That's not my
Yeah,
point.
you can't get it down.
But it's like,
I think 100-foot
if
radius.
you're gonna
is
take
about
away, if
4.
you're gonna take away 8 acres from Jim Dietrich Park, I got us kind of sided with my goodness. As to how they said, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, they said no paths, no walkways, no, it's your land, and we have not, we can't fertilize it, we can't do anything with it.
It's not like you have to fence the whole area, Steve. I mean, you could have your wellhead there and secure that. It would, a bolt-on pitless adapter, locking cap, that's secured. Or you could put a nice building that would with a great facade on it that really matches, and to have the well in this little well health building, and you're gonna have a driveway going up to it. Okay. I had wells where we just had the well and we put like not pavers, but it's so you can drive on, but it's still grass.
But we can't put tennis courts there, bocce ball.
Yeah,
courts
you can't
in,
put it, and
So
you can't put
so
it
the
down,
public can't
but
really
it would
use it.
still
You can't put a
be,
mulch walkway there.
maybe you wanna shrink that zone a little bit, put a walkway along the edge, and you're.
Oh, that's not us though.
But they're getting away from Mike's point. Mike doesn't want to drill a hole at all, correct?
Correct.
You don't want to drill a hole at all.
Yeah.
But we need the water. I'm reading right here, open space park and or recreation area construction. That's what they don't want to lose. Open space, you can't get much more open space than around a well. You'll never, ever be able to build there.
Here's my point, Butch, about the figure. What happens when the million isn't enough? Where do we go next? Why aren't we looking at that plan?
I guess, how much is your build at? I don't know if any projections. on
We
that.
have a lot of vacant property, right?
But that's two different things then.
No, it's not, John. It's asking the question of what's our long-term solution if we can only. get
This is a
million?
long-term solution. If we go to Western Berks, we're gonna pay for water. If we go to Ray, we're gonna pay for water. If we go to anybody else, we're gonna pay for water. Who's gonna pay for it? The customer. Currently, we have the cheapest water in Berks County. Do you want to supply, continue to supply the cheapest water to the people of Muhlenberg Township? If you start going outside this area, you're gonna pay more. And then
No one's told me tonight that $1 million is a long-term fix. That's gonna supply water to a fully developed Muhlenberg Township. Is anyone saying that? I don't believe I heard that. That's what I'm saying, Butch. I think that
But that,
we agree to disagree, so,
Well, I don't think it solves the trade back fire problem.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but, it's kind of like Jeff and I were kind of going around about an incident. I mean, any particular incident, if trade pack or whatever they're called now, if that goes off, I mean, no matter how many wells you have in operation, there's going to be an impact, correct? Because we kind of talked about that with the city a bit, like, I mean, and that's not an everyday event. I mean, and I don't hear anybody from the authority saying that they have to produce X amount of gallons of water per day to cover for a major incident. I mean, we know that if there's a major fire in this township and we're pulling the water resources, we know there's going to be some kind of impact, but that incident ends and then that water is replenished. is the purpose of the well to supplement the wells in operation, or is the purpose of the well to have a reserve should one of the existing wells go down?
Both.
So
You're gonna
this,
supplement, I think when we talked about it, if this well was in operation, we would probably shut down some of our smaller wells, or the wells that have the treatment on them that are costing us twice as much as a well without the treatment, because of the extra pumping, the extra electricity, that type of thing. We would still use those wells when we need to, and on a semi-regular basis, because we have to for testing with DEP, but they wouldn't be a constant. A well like this that doesn't have any kind of extra filtration or extra treatment or whatever is more cost effective to run than a well with the extra treatment. So it would supplement our existing sources, build up that reserve, so it's there when we do need it. Such as a big fire, you could start that extra well, produce more water to keep up with the heavy draw.
and to Commissioner Malinowski's point about thinking long-term needs, I mean, as all of you know, when you're making a decision and you're trying to look at all the different pieces to make that decision, you have to think long-term also, so that you can make a short-term decision that's going to be beneficial down the road. So if you get to go ahead for this well, and now you're adding this extra capacity, and let's just cap it at 1 million gallons for now, just for conversation. Then at what point do we have that next conversation that says, what point does MDA board sit down and say, okay, we have this million, now we need to go get something more? Like, how far out does this take you? At what point do you have to add to this again?
I think Scott touched on it. The missing information is what's the future look like in usage. So we have to put some time into, it's obvious, I made the note, on what is our max usage for the township as it currently exists. We should be able to come up with some reasonable number on that.
Well, and do the other wells, did any of the other wells fail?
Yeah, but that's,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak for the board, I can speak for myself. The reason I'm supporting this is because of this number here. Well 14 goes down, and it goes down for a major mechanical issue. I don't know what that would be. This is where this well basically has the immediacy of delivering for us. So that to me is my perspective. You asked A or B. If we didn't have B, it'd probably be a different conversation.
PCBs find their way to that.
Correct, and right now you're dealing with everybody who's the, tell me the TFOS, the TFOs, and this new regulation coming up and all those. I mean, we could have exposure on existing wells that we don't know yet. They haven't developed the testing. So it's gonna be probably 2 years. We had that at our last meeting that we actually can get test results, understand our situation, but they're out there. We know it's coming. So this is development for the future, but the point is well taken. What could we really develop, and is it time to look at the quarry as a potential source
I
for
mean,
that?
because if you invest 5 million, say that, and to Commissioner Lurch's point, which is an excellent question, what happens if we have a company wants to build at NGK and uses 500,000 gallons a day?
Sure.
So we're gonna have to say no, and yet so the board knows, to Kevin's point, that we went through this decision, which everyone knows where I stand, that's just pretty much throwing 5 million out the door, because you have to build something that's boring anyway. And that's my point. I don't think this is worth the long-term solution if we're gonna need more than 1 million gallons a day.
So for an internal discussion for this board, I don't think there's anybody in this board that denies that we need more water, or we need other sources, or we need to look strategically long-term. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that that has to happen. The question is down to the legal point that Commissioner Malinowski says about the covenant. I'd like you to do me a favor, please. Can you read the specific point that talks about
Open space.
yeah, not the space.
Under 12B, buyer agrees to develop a property in due course in accordance with the restrictive covenant described in paragraph 15. and the placement upon the property of formal and conspicuous plaque, which hasn't been done yet, or signage, and that's supposed to be in honor of Jim Dietrich. In perpetuity, to dedicate the open space, park and / or recreation area constructed thereon to the memory of Sellers' son, Jim Dietrich, end quote. That's the big one right there. Now, you talk about perpetuity. We're sitting here as 5 board members, there's the MTA. But 20 years down the road, we're all gonna be, well, most of us will be pushing up daisies. The next board that comes along and says, hey, we could sell that property out there because it's all open space. They won't be able to sell this because of open space, because of the well. That will last forever.
Well, just to clarify that the covenant is in 15, the end of it says, and to be used for municipal recreation land or public park purposes used for recreation or the enjoyment of scenic and natural beauty and open to the public for such use on a non-discriminatory basis. That is the part of this agreement where I can't agree to the left.
Okay, so, Mr. Malasky, so this is my debate. What we're looking at then is if there is a wellhead there is an area of protection around that wellhead. Within that area of protection, we can't develop, we can't do certain things on that land, but there are things that we can do on this land.
People cross it, they can have a picnic on it, they can, you know.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, you don't have to fence that whole area, that's open.
As per our conversation with
It's under
DEP,
the permittee's control, correct?
Has to be on the correct.
So you're not gonna have a sign there that says no trespass?
No, I've never
Aren't
seen
you
that.
required to?
I've never seen that, Mike, never seen that.
per our conversation with DEP, the only improvements permitted within that zone 1 wellhead protection zone need to be directly linked to the production of drinking water. No pavilions, no playgrounds, no walking trails, no pesticide or herbicide applications. Because all of those, or any improvement that would quote directly impact the recharge of rainwater, end quote.
I had 2 questions, and one was, how do we get that well protection area down? And I'm not arguing for the dog park. For me, the dog park is the recreational area. I don't care if you're gonna put in a playground there or whatever. 7.56 acres for me is a lot to take away from the park. Isn't there any way that you see to be able to shrink that? I mean, my argument was.
You're not gonna like the answer.
Well, my argument was to TP was what we're gonna say, but I said to them, this is the only well we can drill. We're gonna have to go outside for more, and they basically said, no, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right, this region is, they're a very tough one, the zone 1 protection.
I was the person who asked the question about, had tank,
And-
call me the guy for the Band-Aids.
To answer your question about can we reduce the area, this is kind of a catch-22, but you would have to drill a production well there, see what you have, because you don't know until you put the tools in the ground. And test it. And then based on well construction, the yield, the authority needs, and you could kind of weigh out and maybe shrink that zone some. But to produce as much water as we think this site could produce, you want as big a zone as you can possibly get.
Something was said earlier about surface water remediation.
Correct.
What-
It's
If there's surface
groundwater under the influence of surface water, okay? So if there's a direct conduit from, say, the Schuylkill River to the well, then you could get surface water influence potential in there. You could have a lot of coliform, you could have other microbes, nematodes, rotifers, different insect parts.
If that's found, then
It happens in limestone sometimes, and that's why you would have to, but you don't know until you actually construct the well, seal it, get that top hole built, sealed, and test it. And then you test for what we call microscopic particulate analysis. And then that puts the well at moderate, low, or high risk.
Regarding the dog park, the MTA is willing to relocate that dog park anywhere you want to put it. In a park, you just mentioned a dog park,
I mentioned only in that it's recreation area.
but let me finish. They'll move that dog park anywhere you want at their expense. So we're not asking to spend the township expense anyone on this.
The other question I had is, let's turn this into kilowatt hours. If you're an electric company and you can't produce enough electric in a certain area, they'll go to PPL and say, hey, can you service these customers? Can you service these customers? We have some really big customers. The water company, the bottle company out here. And I'm looking for Band-Aids, I know, but I've lost a lot of sleep over this issue. And I'm thinking, how can we make this thing work? And if you take some of those big companies that are using a heck of a lot of water and switch them over to Reading Area Water Authority, we save that water for the residents. I know it's a Band-Aid, I know it might be putting a little bit of little question of expanded businesses.
You can't do it. Tell them why you can't do it.
Well, Crossroads has an issue using Rawa's water. We actually do have the ability that if we had a major main break on 61 on our 12-inch main, we could turn them over to Reading's water.
Clover Farm buys.
But the pressure,
Yes, they buy from both, actually.
pressure difference.
Well, yeah, that's, if we wanted to buy from Rawa, that's an issue because our pressure is greater than Rawa's.
Well, and how well is the water gonna mix too?
What's that? Yeah, the mixture.
Treated water system to a well system.
Yeah,
Difference in treatment.
Yeah, it can get real cloudy. real
Different
fast.
story.
yeah, taste and odor problems. They have a different disinfection than we do. Yeah, that Rawa would be an issue. But we could put Crossroads Beverage on city water, but their process isn't set up to do Rawa water. So if we have to do that in an emergency, we've got to let them know, and they're shut down for a certain amount of time until they can change their whole process and then go back online again.
How many gallons takes that? Yes, they were one of our biggest people.
Yeah, maybe 500,000, 600,000, something like that.
I remind you guys, we had this vote 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
You two guys voted yes. Mike and Derek voted no. I voted no because the mall brought the family in here. If I were to change that vote now, I've already talked to Mike about it. You can't change the vote that's already taken place. But I'm voting to put this wall in here tonight. You two guys voted for it before. We can end this right now.
The other part of that, Steve, is if we turn them over, we're paying Rawa's rate, which is about 6 times higher than ours.
We're just losing that customer. I mean,
Yeah,
your entire budget is to make the first gallon.
Right.
The rest are free. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a plan B consideration when you think about it. That's what it is.
And look, I can believe you, if the company didn't exist, I hear you, I understand, that's not the point that, I don't want us to, I want to raise rates on residents, it's ridiculous. The point is that we have to have a long-term alternative, and this, I believe, violates the covenant. That's, don't worry, I appreciate, I've learned a lot about water and wells, and I appreciate everything that all of you do. I just, that is the sticking point for me, and we'll take a vote, and I know Otto had a hand up. Go ahead, Otto.
Thanks. Who was the attorney for the township that wrote the agreement?
I think it was Jim Bond.
Yeah, probably.
I hate to say that out loud.
Take to hear it out loud.
And even, Butch said the family came in, and what was the family's position when they came in?
Was that she wouldn't have wanted a vote.
Okay.
The family was represented by Steve Lee at the time.
Yeah.
Jim Bond represented the township.
Yeah, they all brought a couple, what was it, brother or something?
Well, Okay, it was family and they said that they would not have wanted it, is that the?
They didn't say that. What they said was they wanted to stay with the agreement. That's all they said. Actually, it didn't say much of anything. We talked about it and that,
So my assessment of this whole thing is, unless, is there a covenant or isn't there? That's the only, to me, that's the only question. It's not how much water, it doesn't matter if there's gold underneath that property. As honorable people with integrity, we have to honor agreements, right? We are a nation of laws. And what was the intent then of that agreement? If the intent of that agreement was no public improvements, no well, I don't even see why the board would take action tonight at all, since you previously voted no. If there's a covenant, then the covenant stands. I believe there is a covenant. I would, hey, this is great, let's have the water, it's the cheapest avenue, but then again, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. It does matter that you honor the agreement and you have integrity. This is not an emergency situation where we have to have this today, right? There are plan Bs, there are other options to pursue. And to me, we shouldn't even have this conversation until there's an imminent emergency on the horizon, right? Did we look at the quarry, right? Did we look at the other options? Okay, yes, preliminary, but to your point, Mike, how long will this water last? So do you really want to go on record tonight as violating the covenant, okay, to put in a wellhead, because and this is, okay, we all know each other with the exception of one person, we're all friends. And you said, Mike, that unless someone files a challenge. Okay, well, I guarantee you, as long as I'm alive, I'm gonna file a challenge. Okay, and I have the wherewithal to do it. That's not a threat. Please do not take it that way. It's just that I'm equal as passionate as honoring people's agreements. Okay, it doesn't matter if I would make $10 million out of this deal, it's not even relevant. The water issue, not even relevant to the cause. We're in no emergency, we're in no nothing. Okay, is there a covenant? And I say yes, and I say there shouldn't even be a vote tonight. Because why? You already voted. Okay, and the vote was no. So if you choose a vote tonight or at some time, I would request the following. First vote, do you believe there is a covenant or not? That should be the first vote. And then second, okay, do you want to, if you vote yes, do you want to violate that covenant? Okay, because I guarantee you, if it's a yes vote, there will be a challenge. And make sure everything is documented in writing so we can all have this out in court.
Thank you.
as usual, he continues on. It's not a violation. It's a matter of interpretation. As this is interpreted, I read it before, I'm going to read it again. There's supposed to be a sign placed on this property. At the time of this covenant, it was not done to date. I'm going to read this, of a formal and conspicuous plaque for signage in perpetuity to dedicate the open space. That's interpretation. Open space to me means open space. That doesn't mean you can build on it anything else. It's just open space. What's wrong? I don't understand that. As far as saying, don't plan now, we don't need it right now, that's not the way we work. We plan ahead. Hell, the planning commission going on right now for your comprehensive plan for 10 years ahead. That's the way we work, not because we don't need it right now. That's dumb. And I don't appreciate your comment.
You say what you want to say, I say what I want to say.
I'm gonna jump in here for a minute. It would really be nice to come to one of these meetings and leave the comments about personal comments out of it.
Thank you.
It would really be nice to be able to do that.
We could do a hard stop in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
to the board of commissioners here. As I look at the covenant, the question that I debate is, you know, I understand that we don't want to do something, we are bound not to do something on this property, public improvements that prohibit the use of this park for, as it's stated, you know, park purposes for the use of recreation or enjoyment of scenic or natural beauty and open to the public for such use on a non-discriminatory basis. The part that I wrestle with is, if I'm going to sit here and say, I'm in favor of putting a well in this park, how does it violate this? Does a big fence go around this thing, and then all of a sudden we say we can't use this portion of the park? The part that I wrestle with is, in my interpretation, and I agree, it's an interpretation of this. If our solicitor can't sit here and give us a definitive interpretation, then I think it's hard for the layman to sit here and do that. No.
No, I
I'm
agree with
just
you.
saying.
I don't know what was in Faye Dietrich's heart.
But to me, you know, to me, as I sit here and I look and I think, okay, we can put a well, and yes, there are things then within this protected area that we cannot do. But there are things within this protected area that we can do that I don't think necessarily violates this part of the covenant. Because you can do things on here, I think, that still allows for the natural beauty or, you know, the public use. We talked about, you know, you could put trails, and you could put mulch trails around there. You
To
could
turn it
put,
into an educational.
Jeff, my comments, okay? I don't mean to cut you off. You know, that you could do something that the public can still access this area. We're not cordoning off this part of the park. So to me, I'm thinking that's my personal debate, that we can still use this part of the park for the public, and it stays within the bounds of this covenant. And it still provides the needs to the resident. That's the part that I wrestle with. Because I think that there are things, and the dog park, to the general public, if anybody's here with concerns about the dog park, we have already addressed, we could put a dog park anywhere in this township, that there would be a dog park somewhere, and no matter what happens, we'll have a dog park somewhere. So put those fears at ease. To me, the question is, do we kind of X off this part of the park and say that we can't use it for anything for the general public? And there's a part of me that hears that we can still use this. It can still be used as part of the park. It can still be used for recreational purposes. Not a basketball court, not a pickleball court, not a baseball field, not a parking lot. But it can still be used for recreational purposes to one degree or another. It can be all natural scenery. That's the part that I wrestle with, because to me, you know, when you put a baseball field or a tennis court, you know, is that in keeping with the natural beauty? It's part of the park, and you know, certainly it's in keeping with a park theme. But you know that. So again, I think I made the point. That's what I wrestle with. So Mike, I don't know. In my personal opinion is, I don't know that putting something like that around the wellhead detracts from the covenant.
Can I ask you a question though? to that
Yeah,
point?
absolutely.
So you think Faith Dietrich would have gave us that land for $1 million, so she's sitting on $20 million of water?
No, I don't think she would have. But I think she made the decision at the time with the best information that we had. And that's what I think we're trying to do tonight, is to make, at least with a future nod, you know, are we looking at the future? And I agree with Mr. Boyd, you know, we don't have to take a vote on this tonight. We don't have to take a vote on this at all. There was already a vote. That vote stands. The question is, you know, as we're working with MTA to help them make a decision about what they need to do. Like, that's why I look at this, to try to get that best information. I think if she'd have known she was sitting on all that water, she might have approached MTA and said, hey, you know what, put a well here. Knowing
She
that,
didn't put that in her document, that's my
Right.
concern.
I-
Is that
yeah.
if she gave us that deal, which we paid, I think, $692,000 for, it was a grant that she didn't pass. is that she did that on purpose, or it wouldn't be in there. I've never seen a covenant like this in some of the property they've given to us. That's my passion for it. It's in there for a reason. And
If I may, from a short standpoint, you know, you get to be as old, when you get to be as old a lawyer as me, you put yourself in the place of a judge that practice all these guys who, Mr. Boyd or somebody else comes into my courtroom with 50 people who love the park, and they say, practically speaking, they just took 8 acres of the park that Mrs. Dietrich intended to give to the township. Now they can't do anything with it. What do you think I'm gonna do, Judge? I'm gonna say, you can't put the well there. That's, I mean, I think it's, and that's, if this would play out, that's how it will play out. Somebody's gonna pack, people are passionate about Dietrich Park. And there's a lot of people passionate about Dietrich Park, and they should be. It's a beautiful place. It's gonna be tough for a judge to say, oh, no, that's okay, you know, box off 8 acres, that's okay.
I want to quickly thank you, Mr. Sentley, just before, because the planning committee comes in soon, to get public comments. Well, and the young lady's had her hand raised, just for the record, if you could state your name.
My name is Marcia Dorns. I live on Frederick Boulevard. I've been going to Dietrich Park since day one. I do think we had a mini ceremony to honor Jim Dietrich, the first or second year to name that park, if I remember back then. And I know you're all laughing at us dog lovers. Our dogs are our life. I can get you 50 people who go to that dog park with their dogs, and we will protest this. We will get a lawyer, we will join him. So just so you know, there are 50 of us. And we do,
It's not gonna be a
we
removal.
love the openness, we love the space. The homes are breaking our hearts, but we understand that's not your land. And just the open air, it's as much for us mentally, physically, as it is for the dogs. And I know you say you're going to move the dog park. If you're gonna move it to Jim Dietrich
Yes,
somewhere, that
Yes.
might help us.
that's gonna happen.
And the other thing to say is you're on a slippery slope, because someone else is gonna find something else on that land. And then you're gonna have a new board, and they're gonna say, well, they put the well, so we can do this, and you're gonna destroy that beautiful park in 15 years, 20 years, you're gonna destroy that park. That's my piece, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Would anyone else like to speak under the public portion for the record?
One of the things. There was a study done by Yost, Stradowski, and Mears, and 2 other organizations, how to develop that park. That study cost $62,000 to do. One of the things that was in that study was they were going to turn Jim Dietrich's farmhouse into a catering service and rent it. It was going to cost the township $1.4 million to fix the house up so they could turn it into a rental. So this is, I love Mike, I love your passion, I really do. But the fact that they tried to do that before, I don't know.
Can I respond to Commissioner Lurch's statement? Commissioner, if everything you said is true, I can agree with your interpretation of the covenant, that this land can be used for something else. That's not what I heard from DEP. I didn't hear that. I heard no mulch trails. I heard basically it's not parks land. That's my question.
Still is.
Understood. And that's what figure out. If I think I don't know that this board needs to take specific action tonight. There's nothing to vote on. Mr. Secretary, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, most of this is fact finding, and whether or not we need to make a vote tonight or not, I don't know.
No one's made a motion.
There's a motion that you need to, I mean, any of you are free to make a motion, if you get a second, that'll be.
Well, I'll make a motion that we vote on it tonight, then.
Can I finish? I'm
sorry.
Hold tight. Okay. You know, well, all right, so if you want to make a motion and we decide at the next point, it just sounds to me that the MDA board needs to, no matter one direction or the other, they need to start looking at other options, long-term options.
And we didn't hear that. I was looking for other options. going to Western Berks, how much more is that gonna cost? I didn't hear that, and I make a motion to table this.
Well, there's two motions, one table.
Okay, so we have, you didn't really make, you made a motion. What is your motion?
I make the motion to approve the moving forward on a well Jim Dietrich farm.
Do I have a second on that motion? Seeing none, that motion dies. Any further comments?
Terry, if you want, we could, I'll second it, and we can set it to a vote, okay?
Okay. So Commissioner Lupia second it. I'll do roll call vote. Commissioner Wolfinger,
No,
Commissioner Lurch,
No,
I am a no. Commissioner Imhoff,
Let's go home.
Commissioner Imhoff, roll please.
Yes.
Commissioner Lupia.
No.
Okay. Motion fails. We do appreciate the work you put into it. It's very, very difficult decision. So thank you for coming tonight. And have a good evening.
Thank you for your time.
thank you.